Dominique Coulon vous demande de l'excuser, il ne peut pas être là ce soir, donc je le remplace au pied levé pour vous présenter Assemble et Maria sorry.
It's fine.
Lisogorskaya. Lisogorskaya. Sorry. Voilà, on a tenu à les inviter parce que y a 3 aspects qui nous intéressent. Donc ils ont une démarche de projet qui est particulièrement atypique. Le second aspect, c'est qu'ils présentent un projet ou une démarche de projet outre-France. Donc ça nous permet de voir ce qui se passe au-delà des frontières. C'est quelque chose qu'on cherche de manière générale quand on invite des conférenciers. Et puis, il y a aussi un espoir, et il montre bien que c'est pas parce qu'on est jeune qu'on peut pas se lancer. Voilà, donc c'est un collectif qui vient de Londres, et je lui laisse la parole.
Bonjour. Just to say, je ne parle pas français, so I'm very sorry. It will be in English. But if you have any questions, just ask me. I can explain. So I'm Maria from Assemble, and I'm one of about between 10 to 20 people. We're a collective, and we all kind of work together. We are friends to begin with. And we started our first project, the Cinerolium, which is a name we made up combining cinema and petroleum. And we started it because we read a newspaper article that there are a lot of empty petrol stations across Britain, and we thought it's an interesting thing because, you know, they're quite good structures because they already have a roof, and they could potentially be reused for something else. And there's a kind of it has this kind of a bit of a Mies van der Rohe feel about it. So we found this petrol station and kind of thought it would be nice to just make something because we were all finished university and were working in architecture's offices and doing quite boring CAD drawing and, you know, drawing toilets all day. And so we thought it would be nice to just make something. And actually, so I, myself and some friends, we worked with the French collective Exist a long time ago, and so we thought, oh, it's a nice way of working. And so so we made the cinema, and this is the view from the street. And when we were designing it, we were kind of trying to make this old glamorous cinema like they used to be in the old days, a place where you can really feel special when you're watching a film. And so we made these seats which were like the cinema seats, but using scaffolding. I mean, now it's a very popular material, but we used it because it was cheap or free. And so you can see these seats, and some of the other seats were borrowed from a cinema museum, so they're quite old. And then we made all the other elements, like the sign and some furniture. And we did it all with ourselves, with our friends. And we also had some people help, like from the theatre, giving us advice. And so this is all us working. And we made these curtains, which we're using industrial roof material. So it's something you use to cover from the rain. And we thought it's nice because it has this kind of silver effect on one side, but also it's it looks kind of like velvet on the inside. And so we basically just used sewing machines and made these folds. It took a couple of weeks, and we broke a lot of sewing machines, but it looked, it was fun. This is view from the inside, and then we got the signs made using a light box and some CNC'd, some plastic. And this is people watching the films, and so the idea was that you would watch the film. And then at the end of the screening, the curtain, we would pull up the curtain, so you would be on the street again. So it would be kind of like an urban experience. And so there's about 12 of us kind of waiting just before the film would finish and just pull the ropes. And this is from the street. So that was really nice, and thing to do because it made us feel like we can do things, that we don't have to be necessarily told what to do. And so kind of since then we've started working maybe more formally. And so the second project was Folly for a Flyover, which is kind of something, it's basically, we applied for an art grant, so we kind of got a prize, and we came up with a project, and we found this site, which was in Hackney Wick, which is east part of London, near the Olympic Park. And this project is in 2011, so it was just before the Olympics actually started. And it was quite an area of conflict, because there was a lot of new development and a lot of old houses were demolished, and so there's kind of a tension between the old residents and the new park and the canals. So it's quite an interesting site. And it's basically under this motorway, which is an empty space. So this is this big motorway which runs across London. And we thought we thought we would do something, again, something which can bring people together, and I guess cinema and theatre is something which we've done before, and so we kind of thought it's an easy thing to use. But this time, maybe something which is kind of more, can involve the community more, and can kind of create a sense of history in this space, which is so in transition and so kind of infrastructural. And so we thought of this kind of image of an old house which was built underneath the motorway. So it was built before the motorway was built, as if the stubborn landlord didn't want to leave when the motorway came. So a bit like that nail house in China. I don't know if you saw the news about that. But anyway, so we looked at all the brick architecture in the area, and we thought we would try and get more people involved in building this. Because the first project was really fun for us, but maybe it was mainly just our friends. But this time we wanted more people to be involved in the construction. And so we were looking at something which can be dried assembly, so not actual bricks, because obviously if you put bricks and mortar, then it's hard to... not everyone can do that, and also it's a temporary project again. So we looked at kind of making fake bricks using timber. So this is all kind of reused timber, but as if they were bricks. And we cut them. We went to this kind of factory, and where they had the old wood, and we cut it down into the dimensions of bricks. And then we put ropes. We kind of drilled 2 holes in each brick and put ropes through them. So I think it was around 11,000 bricks or something. So we basically spend most of our time drilling holes in these bricks. But a lot of people came, and it was families on their day out would help us, and it was quite a fun thing to do. It was like building a toy. And then we would put the bricks through the ropes and attach them to a scaffolding structure. This is us going up and between the motorway. So we had to deal with a lot of paperwork to do with train, the kind of city planning, and speak to a lot of authority figures. So it was a lot of paperwork as well as fun. So this was the building. So the idea was that it's this kind of old, a bit like a Victorian-looking building, which might have been there before, and so. During the day, it would be used as a cafe and just a place for kids to play, because it's on the canal, and so a lot of people walk past there anyway. So it's kind of just creating a space for leisure. And then we also had workshops, and we kind of showed people how to make furniture and had events. And then we also had musicians. So it was kind of it was very free. There was no entrance or exit. It's kind of like a plaza, but under a motorway. And then at night we would show films, and then you can see there's kind of a rake where people had to pay for tickets, but then these guys didn't have tickets, but you can also still see the film. So this is quite relaxed. And any profits that we made were covering the kind of extra cost of construction, because obviously we went over budget. But at this time we weren't a proper office, so we didn't pay ourselves. We had other jobs, so this is more like a hobby project. And this is the building from the road. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, transformed this space, which wasn't, I guess it's not, it was used, but it was used by a very small number of people, and then I guess it became more open after this project. And I guess, and just to quickly show you another theatre project we've done to kind of get the theatres out of the way, which is basically this, where the question mark is our site. It's by this old theatre in Chichester, and it had its 50th anniversary, and they wanted to extend their program and to have something out in the park as well as in the main building. So we came up with this idea of the fly tower, which is basically where all the mechanics for theatre are, all the kind of pulleys and rigging, and to kind of show that, celebrate it as part of the space, and build it together with people in the town. This is an image of the Mormons in America, so this is something we use a lot, this idea of a village building something together. And so this was the theatre, and with the big barn, it's a bit like a barn, with the doors opening onto the park, and inside it's very kind of temporary, and it's quite simple in terms of materials. So it's scaffolding and scaffolding boards, and this is OSB panels. But I guess because it was quite tall space, it felt quite special. And this is a piece of theatre they had where the actors would come out onto the park, and then the audience would be part of the park. And so since then, we started to do our first permanent project. Was this basically design of a public realm, a town square. So this is our first commission, which was to be permanent, and it was it's basically part of South London, which is called Croydon, and this is the very, very south of that part, which is the very edge of London, and it's quite a deprived area. It was built as a new town in the 40s, but it wasn't never properly finished because of the war. So it was started before the war, and then it kind of stopped because they ran out of money. And so the population grew, but it kind of didn't. It kind of outgrew itself, and it was also quite cut out from the rest of London because the only transport they had was bus. And so the tram came in the year 2000. So it's kind of this, sort of a suburban, urban place, which is mainly car parking in the centre and a shopping high street, and then kind of housing on their side. And the kind of site was this town square in the middle, which is very empty. Whereas, so we started to look at the kind of history of the place. And so when it was first kind of inhabited, it was very lively. So there was these are kind of images from this magazine, which was popular in the 50s. So people used to really love the town centre and have all these events outdoors, do the kind of classic villagey town centre thing. But now a lot of the things happen indoors, and outside is very depressing, and mainly cars are there. And so we decided to kind of put together this table of things that happen in the place already, so kind of indoor markets or indoor clubs or things that people do in private, kind of small dance lessons and stuff, and kind of put together a timetable, and thought we would kind of test out some ideas before designing the final project, test them out as small events. So kind of take these things that happen in the city indoors and take them out into the town square. So like cake decorating, and we had dance events for school children, and then this old people dance, which happens in the community centre. We took it out onto this temporary stage. And so after these events, we then decided to form the design, and so kind of the stage became an important part of the final permanent thing. And then the kind of edge of the town, we realized that the bollards are really, these are called bollards in English, I don't know what you call them in French, but yeah, these things which stop cars, but they also stop people enjoying the space. So we kind of tried to make them into something which could be sat, you could sit on. Very simple, but it's just a long bench basically, but then you can't drive through. And this thing, which is completely horrible, we put a kind of a little skate ramp thing on there, and so it was used by kids and older people to play on. Yeah, so that's it for that project. And it's very small tweaks, as opposed very different to what we've done before, but maybe that was enough. So kind of just to quickly, some small projects in between. So we've done some furniture for a festival, and we kind of started to weld, to kind of learn how to make things ourselves, which are more complicated, so like welding, using metalwork. And so we had these chairs, which formed different shapes. And then an exhibition about Lina Bobardi. So this is kind of a family of furniture which shows objects and films related to her buildings. So we cast these furniture pieces which are traveling in Europe now. And so you can see the exhibition. This is, this kind of platform you go onto, and films projected, and a very adjust kind of mobile set. And then another kind of permanent building, which kind of our first small building, really, which is longer than 3 months, which is kind of, it's still there. So is for Otto Cafe, which is an experimental music space in London. And so they've asked us to design somewhere for their musicians to practice. So when they invite people from abroad, so they can have a space to jam or to work on their music. So it was a very, very small budget. And so we looked at the site, and all we can see is rubble, so just rocks. And so we decided that should be the kind of main material of the project. And we also were aware that we don't want this rocks and rubble to look like, I don't know, you can get very lazy architecture maybe. So we wanted to try something different, which you could maybe make effects with waste material like bricks and things like that. And so kind of this image of a building rising from the ground. And so we started on site, and we were lucky because this space, Otto, has a very strong following. There are a lot of fans, because it's a very special space, because it's very international, and the music is very experimental, and it's quite rare in London, actually, surprisingly. So they have a lot of fans, and so they all came and kind of were helping, and starting to put rubble into bags. These are kind of rice bags. You get Chinese rice bags, which is quite strong. And to kind of put them on top of each other and put rope through them. And then this is a kind of mortar, concrete, putting on top of that to put them all together. And then, this building, and it's kind of got rocks basically stuck onto that. And the inside is basically prefabricated trusses. So we didn't make these, we just designed the size, and then there's a company that manufactures these structures. So very efficient, quite cheap. So just put them on top of the bags, and voila, this is the space. Yeah, so very cheap and cheerful. And so some more kind of playing with rubble and mud. We're doing a playground project in Glasgow in Scotland, where kind of, you get these typical estates with playgrounds. And so we, so we wanted to make something which is maybe more fun. And looking at the kind of war, kind of post-war playgrounds. I'm sure you had them in Europe, mainland Europe as well as England. But yeah, so kind of just children playing with the remains of cities. And so it's kind of still, we haven't finished it yet, so it's still a live project now. But the idea is just to kind of get children playing on kind of constructional materials and make this playground, which is a bit wild. And so doing a series of events to kind of get them used to this idea. But the final thing, it's not finished. And so moving on to kind of our recent big projects. This is workshop. So this is Blackwell's workshop. So this project we kind of self-initiated because there was some funding that was allocated to a part of East London, and the idea was for some kind of productive public space. And so we thought it would be interesting because of our interests in making things to create a space which is like a library but for tools, so like a public workshop, which you have a lot of, I guess, like Fab Lab and all those places, but something maybe cheaper and simpler. But so started this idea of public workshop. And it's this part of East London, so you can see all the blue is industrial buildings, and it's undergoing a lot of change, like a lot of places like this in London, where they're being demolished and turned into houses, because obviously industry is declining. And so we wanted to kind of see how new industry can stay in the area and not just completely get rid of this idea of making things. And we looked at a lot of examples of this across the world. So, yeah, Fab Lab, a lot of them are in America, but some in Europe. And so, yeah, places where you can go and pay for a day or for a month, for an hour, to use big machines and space to make things. Usually it's furniture or kind of models or theater pieces. And we kind of put together a business plan or a kind of a research about how they work. And there was kind of a lot of different types. There were more kind of professional ones with really expensive equipment, or more relaxed ones, like and so we kind of came together with key principles for the project. The number one is to make it cheap, so people can use it. This is not just for kind of high-end designers, but also for someone who wants to do something DIY at home. It's something which is also a social space, so somewhere they can meet new people, and to encourage people to test and to learn through making things. So in the library, I guess you learn through reading, but it's how you can learn through just making things by hand, and to connect to other places in the world. And so we did a few tests, which were like mobile workshops, mini workshops, which we took across the area and just made a simple chair, just to see if people actually want this. And so moving on to the kind of the next design, the kind of key spaces which we thought we should have is the kind of, obviously the machines, the places for like big benches where you can make big work, and cafe where people can meet, and outdoor space for bigger projects. And we've had to put together a business plan, a kind of management structure of how it's going to be run. So something which is a bit like a charity, where you have trustees and the person running it, and technicians like you have in school. So you know, if you're not experienced, then someone can be there to help you. And looked at different membership offers, so something which is affordable, something for if you're more professional. So different types of access. And looked at the different types of tools that we need, hand tools, big machines, the kind of key range. And visually, again, with not much, our budget is quite small always, so kind of looking at very simple techniques or effects to make the space look cool, but without spending too much money on the refurbishment. So kind of looking at how the tools can act as decoration. And so we're kind of looking at how you can arrange tools in the space. I'm making some furniture. So the idea is that everything that's in the workshop can be made there. So like seats can be made in this space. And so the kind of overall proposal is, so ground floor is workshop, machines, cafe, tables and for hand tools. And then upstairs, kind of bigger studios. So you can have more private space, which also generates money to basically pay for cheap access for the public. And kind of more clean work. So somewhere where you can take a sewing machine or your laptop and not get it all dusty. And outside is a kind of garden or construction space. So this is the sign. So you can see this is what it is. So it's an existing building which we were adding to. And this is the push handle. So we built all the interior, all the walls and the doors, and so this is looking from this cafe through to the machines. This is the cafe, so you can see there's kind of sample materials on the walls and places for people to read and chill out. And then this is the bench where you have all the machines, the hand tools arranged. So you've got good range. And this is some workshops. So we put on classes for people who don't know how to make something. So evening classes or weekend classes where you can come and learn the basics of woodwork or the basics of metalwork. And some hand tools. And then on the right, you can see there's the bigger machines. So kind of table saw and metal machines. Welding and plasma cutting. And we also have a wood burning oven, so we heat the space by burning waste wood. And this is the website. And so this is some people made things using old pallets. So the idea is that there's kind of this blog where people put their work up, which is really nice. So someone's making a bike. Some people are making these small, I don't know what they're, birds. And someone's making a big installation space. Someone built a bed there, or a weird chair. So it's kind of this idea that, you can make more things and not buy less things. But it's also that making something can be a social space as well as a practical facility. And so we've kind of, thinking a lot about kind of new homes and housing crisis and the kind of approach to reuse. And we're now working on a housing project which is looking at the reuse of old terraces in Liverpool. So these kind of Victorian terrace buildings which are falling apart, and so the council, some people want to demolish them, and we're saying that you can reuse them for housing and have kind of the parts which are the most derelict, they can be kind of gardens, and the places which have more wall, they can be housing. And we've just made these are models we've made, 1 to 10, looking at the kind of spaces you could have in these buildings. And looking at the wider urban realm of how you can connect the streets to have more life outside. So talking of urban realm strategies, so we've been working with the London Legacy Development Corporation, who are a kind of Olympic Park organization. So they're looking after the legacy of the Olympics in that area of London. And they're interested in kind of making it more connected and not just this strange thing with big buildings for swimming and whatever, but also make it into a neighborhood. And so we've been looking at this part, which is this motorway. It's a big road, and looking at how we can make it more people-friendly. So this is kind of just a sketch of kind of an imagined strategy which looks at the reuse of big industrial sites for kind of outdoor markets, also looking at replanting and how you can use the frontages of buildings more, and so one of the projects, so there's a lot of obviously there's a lot of industrial buildings and which are reused for art studios, but the problem with that is that they're being knocked down because they take up a lot of space and they're old, and developers want to build houses on them. And so this is one of the issues that came out of this area, because we are in one of these old industrial buildings and we will soon have to go because it will be demolished. And so we're looking at how you can build affordable workspace, which is new. And so one of the projects which we've just finished, is called the Yard House, so a building you can build in a yard. And so basically it's so you can see there's some industrial buildings. We're in one of them, and so we're occupying this double-roofed building, and we were thinking of building something in the yard, which can, while we are there, kind of be a self-sustainable thing, generate some income, but also be an example of affordable workspace. And so this building, which is quite cheap, but then has this facade which makes it look maybe more, it's kind of a part of the urban realm, as opposed to something very industrial which is hidden, something which has a face of a civic architecture, but then very cheap at the back. And so we're looking at this material kingspan, which I guess you get a lot in industrial sheds, like out-of-town business parks and all that stuff. It's quite cheap, but it's insulated panels, and it's quite easy to take apart and put back. And kind of using a timber frame as the main structure for the building, and these as the main cladding, self-insulating cladding. And so this is us starting to build this thing with a spider crane. And this is it in construction. You can see a view from the canal. It's quite tall. So this is the timber frame, so kind of quite huge beams. It's basically like a big barn. And the idea is that you have these two kind of, so it's kind of one main space and 2 floors, and a kind of gap in the middle. So it's quite a generous, so each one of these is 4.5 meters high, so underneath. So it's quite a generous space, especially if you're making art or you're making furniture or whatever, making architecture models. It's quite good because you have a lot of height. And we built the handrails. And so this is you can see this is the space on the inside. So this is this kind of central staircase, and the idea is that we've built this core, and then whoever's renting out the space builds their own walls and doors. So it makes it cheap for us, but it also makes it cheap for them. So because we don't have to spend a lot of money on kind of fancy walls, wallpaper, or whatever. It's very simple, but you have the freedom to change it. And so people started moving in, and so you can see there's very different types of, there's a painter, there's a furniture maker, a guy who makes big installations. And then on the outside is that's kingspan material. On the outside, so we've put timber battens on the facade, and on them we've basically put tiles, so you'll see them in a minute, but we've been making these tiles ourselves using concrete and fiber, and something we've looked at in kind of old DIY books from the 60s, and I really like this idea of making something very quite cheap, but obviously something which takes a lot of time to make, but also something you can just make yourself. And so we made this kind of template for cutting the tiles. and added some pigments, so different colors, to make them more fun. So you can see on the back, there's a little hook onto which you put the tile on, and 2 holes so you can nail it in. And so this is us on there. I was doing some of it, and it was really scary because you go, you go up higher than, I don't know, 6 meters high. So overall, it goes up to the peak is about 10, 12 meters high. So this is the scissor lift which we rented, and this is the finished thing, which looks a bit like fish, or I don't know. And this is it at night. This is it again. And so we had a kind of dinner with all the tenants, and this idea of having a space where different types of industries can meet, we quite like. So it's kind of a college, environment. And so basically, so Assemble, we are based in the pink space, which is the office, and Workshop East is basically a workshop, carpenters who are renting out a space there, and this is Yard House, the new thing we built. So basically we have over, there's 30, 40 people here now, and everyone's kind of doing different things, so it's kind of a nice, we've basically created a creative cluster in this derelict industrial area. And actually I think that's it. Do you have any questions, or I can talk in more detail about anything. I think I went too fast. Also, we are leaving, so I'll tell you more about this. So we are basically renting this out from a developer who is, so the developer bought this site originally from the council, from the city, to develop homes, and so it was actually, so the city gave us the space, and then the developer bought the space off the city and kind of kept us there on very low, cheap rent, because we are kind of young creative industry, and it's good for their image because of the new housing development. And so we have about 2 years left until we have to move, but maybe longer. But it's interesting because it's kind of successful. They are thinking of integrating us into the future of the development, maybe into the Olympic Park. And I guess it's an interesting thing to think about whether it's a good or bad, because in one way we are kind of gentrifying the area because it's becoming maybe because of this kind of creative thing. Maybe in the future the properties will be more expensive, because that's what happens with artists move and make things more valuable. But maybe it's also good because there's actually a cheap space for people to do things, which isn't just shopping or kind of office spaces. So I don't know, it's a thing to think about. Yeah. Do you have any, sorry because it's in English and French, but if you have any questions or anything, I can talk about more. Yep.
What about your group? You said you are 10 or?
Yep, so let me just go back. Sorry, this is the...
You are about 20? It's only architect, I think, no?
So I'll show you with the... It's a good question.
Sorry.
I'm just... just in case you forgot. Sorry. So we are mainly 10 people, but then there's a kind of wider collective of 15 to 20, and I think about a third are well, maybe a half architect. So there's a lot of architects, but there's, I'll show you. So this is the people who are in the office most of the time. So Louis on the left, he studied history, but he's somehow kind of the key expert on plumbing and electrics, and he builds the toilets. So I don't know how he learned that, but he does it okay. This is me on the ladder. I studied architecture, so it's quite boring. Then Alice, she studied architecture. Fran, they're holding the column. She studied philosophy and politics. And then she also did an art degree. And then all these guys did architecture. And then the guy on the right, I don't know what he does. We just kind of found him through a friend, and he's kind of been around, and he does a lot of different things. So he's helped on ships somewhere in Saudi Arabia, and now he's helping us. I'm not sure. Then there's an architect on the top. In the middle is a guy called Jordan, who's a guy from Bulgaria who is a builder. And then on the left, Amika, she studied English literature. So she's very articulate. And at the bottom is more architects. We have a musician as well on the other side of the column. He does a lot of DJing, and he has a music studio in there as well. So yeah, we need. I think if anyone's we need a financial person. I think we need a financial expert now. Yep. It's a good question. So we call ourselves a collective because we are all freelancers. So we're not paid a salary, kind of blah, 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 but it just depends on projects. But then we are also an office because we kind of pay a tax to the general, our collective bank, and then we spend it on office things like printers and tea and rent, internet, all that stuff. So it's both somehow, yeah.
And also, I want to know the place of the public in the design of your project, the place of the public. If you, for example, if you ask some people to what we do, what they want,
Mm-hmm. So how they get to take part in the project? Yeah, well, so in the kind of example of the Croydon, which was the deprived part of South London, where we did the town square. So there, the events was a place when we could talk to them and organize events with them. So kind of find out who wants to do kind of an event and kind of talk quite informally. But also we had a residency in the town square in this little building which used to be a public toilet and now is a community building. And so we were there kind of 2 days a week just working from there, and then people would come in and we would talk to them about what we're doing and try to inform designs like that. Also getting people involved in building, I guess it kind of sounds a bit selfish, like we're getting people to help us build, but actually, because it gives people something to do, and then that starts a conversation, and then they can challenge what we're doing or say they don't like it, because we found that when you just ask people, what do you want, or give them a questionnaire, it's not always a very successful outcome. It's very flat, whereas doing things with people kind of worked. So, yeah, doing something temporary before you do something permanent. Yeah, but we're still working out what it really, because it's not perfect. So every project we try and think, how does the public get involved? So it's not always. Sometimes it's quite not so. I don't know. maybe not so in depth. Yeah. Yep.
How long did it take to actually get more commissions from the urban planners?
Is it hard? What was the first?
Yeah, like how long
Yeah.
did it take to actually get recognized?
That's a good question. So I guess it was about a year and 2 years or something, a year and a half, 2 years. Because so the first project was first two projects are kind of self-made, and then so the first planners project was a competition, which we entered 2 years after starting. And we were very surprised that we managed to win because we were so young and we didn't have a kind of qualified architect on board. But I think what happened is that, that one of the planners, he was also quite young and he liked what we were doing, so he managed to help us by giving us a chance. So it was quite we were quite lucky. And then gradually, building up. But also doing our first building, so now we are shortlisted for a competition to do a gallery extension in the Goldsmiths University, and we're kind of shortlisted with kind of more established architects, and it's kind of a good. So I guess to get to this point, it's been 4 years. But I think what helped us as well was that we kind of had fun and we did something which a lot of people came to, and so it was a kind of a good publicity thing. It wasn't meant to be, but it happened that way. And I think another key thing, which is also an issue, is that we started off by making things very cheaply because we didn't have any money, and so now there's a lot of thinking, or planners or whatever, clients think that, we can get these people because they are cheap. So there's so that's good, but it's also bad because now we're actually trying to pay ourselves. So trying to be less cheap. If you have any more questions, I can leave my email or just come up to me after this. Yep.